we say there's no cameras in the courtroom. That doesn't mean there aren't any sound bites coming from this thing, and I want to talk about a couple of them right now. One, the opening prosecution, the government, Keith Alexander making their case, and a couple of things he did underline and underscore. One, he points out the robe the defendant wore in the public hallway did not put her above the law. And they're going to make quite a big deal out of Judge Hannah Dugan wearing her robe in the public area. That is very unusual. Another statement that was made today, get out. Keith Alexander stressing that point, that this was what Judge Dugan allegedly told the number of ICE and EO and CBP officials who are all there. There were 6 in total. She accounted for 5 of them. The government pointed out there was a 6th agent sitting on the floor outside the chief judge's office that she didn't notice. But he kept saying this to the jurors: was this business as usual? And he sets up the stage for Dugan coming up with a plan on the spur of the moment to get the defendant, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, out of the building. I'll get the heat. Those are the sound bites, if you will, from Dugan. Now, the defense is coming back and saying, look, a couple of things. There's no intent to prevent discovery, and there are 2 charges against Dugan, keep that in mind. And there's no corrupt intent, no actual obstruction. To which the government already said in their opening statements, that doesn't matter. It does not matter that Flores Ruiz was caught just outside the courthouse as he tried to run away. That doesn't matter. The intent, they're saying, is that she tried to help.
Well, Senator, if I could,
government is making a case.
If I could offer one thing, because I realized we started this whole coverage thing without really giving a basic background. Let me do that very quickly for those who are tuning in and go, I don't know anything about this case. This is a Milwaukee County judge who heard that ICE agents were in the hallway outside of her courtroom. She had an undocumented immigrant who was there for misdemeanor battery charges. She goes out into the hallway, tells these ICE agents there's video of her telling a couple of the ICE agents, you need to go to the chief judge's office and deal with this there.
Which we'll do a lot with location and geography of that 6th floor, but that chief judge's office is mere feet down the hallway.
Right next to her courtroom. Ultimately, after directing the ICE agents into that chief judge's office, she goes back in to her courtroom, tells Eduardo Flores Ruiz, who you just saw coming out of that door, this client, reschedule your case, get a new date, and go out this private hallway, and then he ends up being caught. The reason I bring this up is you talked about the fact that he ultimately was caught, and he was outside the courthouse where agents were able to track him down on foot. He ran, they caught up with him. Part of the government's case here is you attempted to conceal this person. Doesn't matter that he ultimately got arrested. And I think about it, this sort of analogy, if you run from the police at a traffic stop and they catch you, you are still charged with eluding the police. It doesn't matter that you didn't get away. And that's kind of what the government's saying here, right? They're saying that it doesn't matter that he still got caught. You tried to help him get away.
Right, and so they underscored that point as they went first, but the defense coming back to say, look, there was no intent to prevent discovery. There was no corrupt intent to actually show obstruction. So that's what the jurors are going to have to decide, and both of those sides are going to make their case as we go forward. But the government opening up their case with a much longer opening statement than Stephen Biskupik, who is the lead attorney for Judge Dugan, making the point that Dugan went, when she found out there were ICE agents there from her law clerk, court reporter, I should say, went and grabbed Judge Severa, who was next door, motioned to her. She was already on her bench to come out into the hallway to talk to the ICE agents. She sent Severa down the hallway to Chief Judge Ashley's agents. She said to these ICE agents, and I'm using ICE as a general term here because we got about 4 or 5 different
FBI's involved
jurisdictions
here,
here
Border
all coming
Protection,
together.
DEA.
Yes, FBI, right. So I'm going to use that federal agents as a very broad term for these 5 or 6 agents who were in that hallway. Severa took them down. He's going to call Severa as a witness because he told jurors today, Severa's going to tell you she was very uncomfortable being a part of that, very uncomfortable being taken off the bench. she started to take off her robe to go out into the hallway, and the government alleges that Dugan said, no, leave your robe on, almost has a intimidating effect to say, hey, we're the judge, we're out here in the hallway, just so you know, we are judges.
Ted, that stood out to me, just to hit that point too, while you're bringing that to our attention here this morning, because I'm trying to think about all of this from the standpoint of our viewers, right, who are going to be very similar to those jurors, now 13, not 14. We don't necessarily have law degrees. We don't necessarily know the ins and outs of county court versus federal court, where they are, versus a normal day in a setting that for most people who are going to a courthouse is not normal. But for the judges it is, for the staff there it is. And in that opening, it was that quote that you said as well, it was no longer business as usual. It was no longer a routine day. And those robes specifically already coming out in that opening statement.
And the fact that Dugan goes back into her courtroom through the public entrance, not around out through her chambers, back through the entrance as if to make a beeline as quickly as she possibly can back to her
ironically
bench.
Not using the door and hallway that Eduardo Flores Ruiz would use moments later.
Correct. The point the government's trying to make is that she was trying to speed up this process. 2 minutes and 49 seconds. They made a big deal about that time frame. 2 minutes and 49 seconds. That's the time period from which she first talked to the agents in the hallway and then had the defendant leave out that hallway that is usually just for jurors outside that door. The government, I should say the defense is saying, yeah, that's not that big of a deal. She had 30 cases. It was Good Friday. She wanted to be out the door by noon for church services to begin the Easter weekend. She had 30 cases on her docket that day. It is not unusual for attorneys to jockey for position and say, I got a case in Madison, I got to go, I got to do this. So that the defense,
except if I understand correctly,
that's business as usual.
That may be the defense's case, but what seems to work against them here is that there were victims in the courtroom waiting for this to take place, and instead of calling the case and doing whatever was scheduled, she says, just get a new date and we'll do it over Zoom. So if the argument is, well, sometimes people go first and we got to move them quickly, then why did she tell them to come back another day?
The defense has not addressed that yet. This is just their opening statements where they're both sides are trying to outlay their case here. You're getting into some very good points, and you're getting into the minutia a little bit of this that isn't going to come out in the opening statements. I see where you're going, and you're absolutely right. The prosecution did bring up that case. They said, look, we had 3 defendants here, or not 3 defendants, we had 3 victims here who wanted justice that day, and they were denied justice because Eduardo Flores Ruiz was ushered out the building. Ushered out by his attorney, ushered out by the judge, well, that's what we're going to have to decide here.